lot less songs, and there was a little dialogue added in. And there was a lot, how do I put this? I guess after that, after it kind of got shortened down, later on, there was someone else who took it and cut it into 2 specific acts, which made it more like a musical, rather than an opera where it originally had like 4 acts or so, like tons of like music all over the place. But I think it's an operetta because there still is tons of music in it, like most of it's music, but there is lines in it, which is kind of a characteristic of an operetta, and it's specific 2 acts. But I think there's also versions that do like the original 4-act version. I'm not specifically sure about that, but there is a specific 2-act with intermission version.
Can I raise one point? Do you know that operas also do have some spoken lines in them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Ben?
To reiterate what kind of Rachel said, it's an opera because that's what Gershwin considered to be when he wrote it. Gershwin himself cut it down for Broadway. It was Gershwin himself who cut it down for the Broadway premiere. And then had another version 10, 15 years after that, what you're talking about, I think, but it cut down even more. It got whittled and chopped down bit by bit by bit. A big part of that was because the way the communities thought it depicted the African American. So there's this whole racial aspect as well, too, about it, where it's very, I don't want to say derogatory in a way, but you can read it that way. They're using drugs to get rid of their problems. There's violence in the community. They're all poor fishermen. There's gambling going on. He wrote it as a folk opera to depict that time and era based on a play from that time and era. So Gershwin himself dumbed it down in a way, added dialogue. 1976 was when it finally became fully realized how he originally wrote it. All 4 acts, everything was sung again. Houston Grand Opera is the one who did that. It's the only opera to ever win a Tony Award. So ever since then, it's really been considered an opera. And it's been done as an opera ever since then. Just because something opened up a certain way doesn't mean that's the way it stays in musical theater or opera. It morphs and changes. Candide, there's 13 different versions of Candide.
Right, exactly.
Some are very musical, some are very opera. It's the same kind of idea. So in 1976, Houston Grand Opera did the full version. All the singing was added back in, all 4 acts, all the characters. And ever since then, it's been an opera version. Now, with this new one coming to Broadway,
That's exactly what I was about to address.
What Bobby was talking about. They've cut out a bunch of the songs. They've added spoken dialogue back in. So it's funny how it parallels itself over and over again. So this new version coming to Broadway, I haven't researched enough yet. I probably would call it a musical, not an opera.
And especially the directors and the people that they have in the creative process. Susan Laurie Parks, who is a Broadway, and Diane Paulus, who's a Broadway director. Now, I think the piece is going to be open for interpretation again after the Broadway production. Go ahead, Bobby.
I remember reading about that it won a Tony Award, and that's kind of one of the things that made me think it was an operetta also, because, like you said, it was the only opera to ever win the Tony. So it also made me think, like, does that mean it's not an opera because it actually won a Tony Award instead of like where a full-blown
Tonys win operas. Yeah, operas win Tonys.
They can.
What the Tony's Award are, it's not when it's musical or whatever. If a ballet opened up on Broadway and was the best thing they had there, it would win a Tony Award.
It did. It was the Swan Lake with all men.
Yeah. So whatever's on Broadway, is what the Tony Award is for. It could be a circus.
Circus Soleil, things like that.
Yeah.
Circus Soleil could win a Tony Award if they actually ever opened up on Broadway. So it's not necessarily has to be musical win a Tony and this for something else.
I think. Can I say something to interject? Operetta is more light in sound and instrumentation, whereas Porgy and Bess is definitely not. It's full. And so if you really want to get into specifics that way, that's where I think it would not be classified as an operetta, because it's for dramatic voices. If you are trained, you aren't singing in that show. It's not a show that you can just hop off the road because you can dance and carry tune to be in. It's not going to happen.
But what about Sweeney Todd? That's really dark. And the singing
It's an
is really dark.
Operetta-ish musical.
That's what I mean. So why just because it's dark does that?
I didn't say dark. I said dark as in heavy.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah, Sweeney Todd's not heavy to me. Not all of it. Yeah, Joanna, who's very, very light and flying birdie sound and things like that. Porgy and Bess is heavy. I'm talking like in Fox. They call it Fox, and that's basically voice types. Are they dramatic sopranos? Are they lyric tenor? What are they? That's what I'm talking about.
Like the My Man's Gone Now song, Best You Is My Woman, these big, heavy songs.
Yeah.
I do understand what Sarah meant though, also, because it gave off a musical-ish vibe.
Yeah, like the
because I think it's modern opera, it gives off a musical.
Well, and that's where the rub comes in. Okay.
That's because that's American opera.
It's
Yeah.
American opera has the
right.
influence of jazz and all that in it.
And musical theater.
Yeah.
What did Gershwin write mostly at the beginning of his career?
Musical.
Musicals.
Musical theater. That was his main gig.
Which is why people.
He wrote 15 musicals. None of them performed today. Really. They weren't that great. The songs were cool. But remember, we haven't done musical theater history yet. Mr. Brian's going to talk more about this.
Right.
Musical theater back then was kind of slapstick and thrown together.
Boy.
A bunch of songs. Let's write a plot about these songs. It wasn't how we think of a plot with music written for it. It was songs and you throw a plot into it.
Slowly, the narrative became
More
important
right.
towards the middle of the 1900s. Like I was telling you about Peter Pan and how that was one of the big Broadway productions in the early 1900s. It only had 2 songs. And it wasn't until after the mid-1900s, I think after 1947, is when they said, oh, this could be a great piece. Why don't we go and make it a true musical? Or well, not so much a true musical. Why don't we go add more songs to it? And then that's when we started seeing that.
The first composer to actually write a thorough musical where the songs
Which
match
even
the
some of
plot.
theirs are leaning towards more of a classical style, like Carousel, very, very, very
Classical place, yeah.
Here, Bobby's got a new song. It's called Lonely House from Street Scene.
Love it.
Street Scene is an American opera
Kurt Weill.
by Kurt Weill. But it's considered musical theater also. It's in a book that's called Musical Theater Songs for the Classically Trained Voice. Okay? Is it a musical? Is it an opera? I think it's an opera. It's an American opera. American opera mixes jazz, mixes all. It's so jazzy and stuff, right? But it's so hard.
I've been there.
The lyrics are awesome. They're by Langston Hughes. I was like, this is fabulous. It's cool.
Just one thing I think also that was a factor in why people maybe thought it was more musical theaters was one, that's kind of what Gershwin was known for at the time. He was kind of, so people thought, oh, it's another musical. And then also, it was the first opera to incorporate African American people in it. Yeah, and at the time it was like 1935 or something, right?
I think so.
Yeah, so that was like way before like any of the civil rights movements really got in full swing. So I think that also made people think maybe because opera was kind of this, like
Old dead white guy European.
Yeah, so I think that also made people think more musical theater-ish in a way, just because of how people thought